Hello there, it's Carrie from Cottage Craft 723. Welcome. Today we're making Twinchies. It must be Tuesday. Now, if you've never heard of a Twinchie before, don't worry. It sounds far more complicated than it actually is. A Twinchie is simply a 2 by 2 inch square of cardstock that you decorate. That's it, 2 inches. Apparently, somebody looked at an ATC one day and thought, oh, that's lovely. But frankly, it's enormous. And the Twinchie was born. You can swap them with other crafters just like ATCs. Use them as little embellishments in your journals. Add them to pockets or tuck spots. Or, as I'm doing today, turn them into these lovely little journal prompts. I'm making 4 of them today. And the background I'm using is actually my teapot and teacup paper that I created a few weeks ago. Insert shameless plug here. It is available on my print shop, and the link will be in the description box below. I've already cut out the 4 squares, and then I'm going to add a journal prompt to each one. Some beautiful little butterfly stickers that I've had in my stash for several years. Are you impressed? I'm actually using them. I am. And finish them off with some fabric bows. This was also inspired by Erin from Coop's Place Crafts and Jen from Clever Duck Creations. So thank you, ladies, for yet another reason to go digging through my craft supplies. My available storage is delighted. My stash is a little less enthusiastic. Now, since we're putting journal prompts on these, I thought we'd talk about journaling while I make them, because journaling is supposed to be therapeutic, and it is. But I do think the advertising has been slightly misreading. You know the pictures I'm talking about. Whenever you see somebody journaling, it's always beautiful. There's a gorgeous journal, a fountain pen, a candle burning, a perfectly positioned cup of tea, maybe a vase containing 3 wildflowers that this woman has apparently wandered into a meadow and gathered that morning. And she's sitting there peacefully writing, "Today I'm grateful for," lovely, very serene. What they never show you is 20 minutes later when she's 3 pages in and writing. And another thing, because that's journaling too. You can sit down perfectly innocently thinking, I'll just write a few thoughts about my day. And somehow you find yourself examining something Linda said to you in 1997. You hadn't thought about Linda in years. You weren't even angry with Linda anymore. At least you didn't think you were. But apparently your subconscious has been keeping records, receipts, supporting documentation, possibly even witnesses. And now that you've opened the journal, your subconscious has decided that it's finally time for the hearing. And joking aside, that's part of what can make journaling genuinely useful. We carry an extraordinary amount of unfinished conversations around with us. Things somebody said, things we wished we'd said, things we worried might happen, things that probably won't happen, but our brain has decided we should prepare for that anyway. And my personal favorite, arguments we've already had that we continue having by ourselves, usually in the shower, because that's when you finally think of that perfect response. 3 days late. In the shower version, actually, you're magnificent. You're calm, you're articulate, you're devastatingly witty. The other person is absolutely speechless. You make your final brilliant point and walk away with your dignity completely intact. Unfortunately, during the actual argument, you said, yeah, well, whatever, and then promptly walked into a door. But when you write things down, you're giving all of that noise somewhere else to live for a while. Instead of letting a thought run laps around your head, you put it on paper. And once it's sitting there in front of you, sometimes it doesn't look quite as frightening. Sometimes you look at it and think, oh, is that what I've been worrying about? And sometimes you look at it and think, good Lord, that's considerably worse written down. Both, however, are useful information. And then there are journal prompts, which brings us to these little prompts I'm putting onto my Twinchies. Because journal prompts can be wonderful, but some of them need to calm down. You'll be sitting there quite happily with your tea and your pretty journal, and suddenly you're asked, what is preventing you from becoming the person you were always meant to be? Excuse me? We only just met. Can we warm up a bit first? Ask me my favorite season. Ask me what makes me happy. Ask me where I'd go if I could travel anywhere in the world. Don't come straight through the door demanding access to my childhood trauma. I haven't even finished my tea yet. And then there are those deceptively innocent prompts. What would you tell your younger self? Oh, well, how long have you got? Because apparently I've prepared a whole presentation for this. First, do not cut your own fringe. We can prevent several unfortunate photographs immediately. Don't do it. Second, that man? No, we're not going to do that. Keep walking. Third, buy the good shoes. You're going to buy the cheap ones 3 times anyway. And finally, one day you're going to become emotionally attached to pieces of decorative paper measuring less than 2 inches. Don't question it, just accept that this is where we're heading. But then something happens, and this is where journaling can catch you off guard. Because sometimes you answer one of those questions as a joke, and then you keep writing. And somewhere between the funny answer and the next sentence, something honest slips out. Maybe you realize that something doesn't hurt quite as much as it once did. Maybe you discover that something you thought you'd completely forgotten is still sitting there. Maybe you recognize a pattern. Or maybe you look back at the younger version of yourself and realize she didn't need another person telling her everything she'd done wrong. She probably needed someone to tell her you were doing the best you could with what you knew at that time. And suddenly this silly little question has taken you somewhere you weren't expecting to go. That's the strange thing about writing. Sometimes your hand gets to the truth before your head does. And I think that's one reason I like the idea of putting prompts on something as tiny as these little Twinchies. They're not intimidating. It's one question, one thought, one little doorway. You get to decide whether you walk through it. You are allowed to say no. That's another thing nobody tells you about journaling prompts. You don't have to answer them. You can pull one out and read, describe the moment that changed your life forever, and decide, nope, not today, back in the box you go. Let's see what else we've got. What brings you comfort? There we are. Tea, cats, craft supplies. We're back on safe ground. Because journaling isn't supposed to become another thing you're doing incorrectly. There are no journaling police. Nobody is coming around to check whether you've sufficiently explored your inner child before Tuesday. You can write 3 pages. You can write 3 sentences. You can write 1 word. You can decorate the entire page and write absolutely nothing. It's your journal, which is rather liberating when you think about it. The crafting problem, of course, those of us who are crafters have managed to complicate journaling beautifully. Normal person, I think I'll start journaling. I need a notebook and pen. Crafter, I think I'll start journaling. 3 weeks later, we have 6 journals, 14 rolls of washi, vintage labels, stamps, ink, stencils, 73 pieces of ephemera, a special pair of scissors, an Etsy order currently somewhere in Ohio, We haven't written anything yet, but we're extremely prepared, which brings me rather neatly back to these butterflies. I've had these for years. I mean, years. And today I'm actually using them. I'd like everyone to appreciate the personal growth happening here, because using something you've been saving is a major event in the crafting world. We buy beautiful supplies just because they're beautiful. Then we don't use them because they're too beautiful. So we put them somewhere safe. Occasionally we take them out and look at them. Then we put them back because we're waiting for the perfect project, which apparently requires a planetary alignment, written permission from the craft gods, and possibly a full moon. But not today. Today, we're using the butterflies. Personal growth. Forget the journaling. I use the stickers. That's enough emotional development for one afternoon. And actually, there's something rather nice about that idea too. Using the things we've been saving, not just craft supplies, the good china, the nice perfume, the candle that's apparently far too beautiful to actually light. Why do we do that? Why buy a candle because we love the smell and then refuse to burn it because then the candle will be gone? Yes, that's how candles work. Meanwhile, we're sitting beside an unlit candle for 12 years, waiting for an occasion sufficiently important to smell like vanilla. Maybe Tuesday is important enough. Maybe sitting at the craft table making 4 ridiculously little 2-inch pieces of paper is important enough. Because if something gives you pleasure, perhaps that's reason enough to use it, which is dangerously close to becoming profound. So we'd better move along before anybody becomes uncomfortable here. Let's talk about journaling again. One of the things I really like about writing privately is that you're allowed to contradict yourself. You can write, "I'm absolutely finished with this situation," and 2 paragraphs later, although having said that, that's fine. Nobody is grading it. Nobody is fact-checking your emotional consistency. You don't have to present the polished version of yourself. You don't have to be reasonable. You don't even have to have a point. You can be angry on one page and completely change your mind on the next, because sometimes you need somewhere to say the thing you would never actually say out loud. And then you can close the book, which is considerably cheaper than bail. And sometimes the thing you write surprises you, not because it's some enormous revelation. Sometimes it's something very small. Maybe you realize you're tired. Maybe you've been saying yes when you wanted to say no. Maybe you miss somebody. Maybe you don't miss somebody nearly as much as you thought you did. That's an interesting one. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes you simply realize, oh, I haven't thought about that in a while. And that's it. Something that once occupied enormous amounts of space in your head has quietly packed its bags and left. Didn't even return the key, and you didn't notice. I think that that's one of the gifts of keeping a journal over time. You have evidence. You can look back at something you wrote a year ago and barely recognize the person who wrote it. Sometimes that's comforting. Sometimes it's embarrassing. And occasionally you'll read something and think, oh, for the love of God, woman, get a grip. But you know what? She eventually did. You're here, and she got you here. So perhaps we should be a little kinder to the previous versions of ourselves, even the ones with questionable hairstyles, especially those ones. They've suffered enough. And while we've apparently been sorting through our entire emotional history, our 4 little Twinchies are coming together rather nicely. We've got our teapot and teacup background, the journal prompts, our butterflies, those distressed edges that I love so much, and now I'm going to finish them with these little fabric bows. Normally this would be the moment where I'd reach for my Fabri-Tac, except I can't find it. I know I own it. I know it's somewhere in this craft room, but apparently the Fabri-Tac has decided it needs some personal space. The glue gun isn't available either, so we're improvising. I'm using the regular paper glue. Is that what it was designed for? Probably not. But neither was I designed to spend this much time discussing 2-inch pieces of cardstock, and yet here we are. So the paper glue is being promoted. Congratulations. New responsibilities. No additional pay. I'm adding one little fabric bow to each of these, and I really do think the bows finish them off. We've got the pretty background, a little vintage feel from the distressed ink, the butterflies, the prompts, and now the bit of fabric texture on top. And there we are. 4 little Twinchies. You could make a whole collection of these, swap them with another crafter, tuck them into journals, use them as embellishments, or make a set of journal prompts and pull one out whenever you feel like writing. And I love that something so tiny can become the beginning of something much bigger. 2 inches of cardstock, one little question, and you never quite know where the answer might take you. Sometimes somewhere meaningful, sometimes somewhere funny, sometimes directly back to Linda in 1997. Apparently Linda still has some explaining to do. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. And thank you again to Erin and Jen for inspiring me to have a play with this.